Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something no one prepares you for. The moment someone hurts you, they expect a reaction they can control. They expect tears. They expect anger. They expect you to explain, to chase, to beg for clarity. But there is one reaction that stops them cold. One response that makes them question everything they thought they knew about you. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. It's the moment you choose calm over chaos, self-respect over explanation, and walk away without breaking. And that's when the real power begins. The one reaction that confuses a man after he hurts you is not anger, not tears, not explanations, not long messages at midnight. It is your calm, it is your clarity, it is the moment you choose yourself without drama, without begging, without shrinking. Because when someone expects chaos and you give them composure, their world tilts. They expect you to chase, to ask why, to replay every moment and try to fix what they broke. They expect your pain to orbit around their behavior. What they don't expect is your silence filled with strength, your dignity standing taller than their confusion. You see, pain has a script people assume you will follow. Cry, confront, collapse, cling. And when you don't follow that script, when you step outside of it with grace, it unsettles them. Calm is powerful because it says, I see exactly who you are, and I am choosing myself anyway. Calm is not weakness. Calm is self-respect with a steady heartbeat. It's knowing your worth so deeply that you don't need to shout it into the void. When someone hurts you, they often expect control. Control over your emotions, your reactions, your availability. They expect to be the center of the storm they created. But when your reaction is grounded, when you don't offer instant forgiveness or dramatic confrontation, they feel something unfamiliar. They feel the loss of leverage. They feel the absence of the chaos they rely on to avoid accountability. Your calm forces them to sit with themselves. There is a quiet confidence in not over-explaining, in not defending your boundaries, in not chasing closure from someone who couldn't offer care. When you don't argue, when you don't plead, when you don't try to make them understand, you send a message louder than any speech, I trust myself. And trust is magnetic. It unsettles people who are unsure of their own intentions. The reaction that confuses a man after he hurts you is when you stop negotiating your value. When you don't try to prove how much you love, how much you tried, how much you endured. When you simply step back and let reality speak. Because reality has a way of being very honest when you stop interrupting it with excuses. Your absence of reaction becomes a mirror. And mirrors make people uncomfortable when they are not ready to see themselves. This reaction is rooted in self-worth, not strategy. It's not about playing games or pretending not to care. It's about caring enough about yourself to choose peace over performance, to choose alignment over approval, to choose growth over validation. When you respond with clarity, you are not punishing anyone. You are protecting yourself. And protection looks confusing to someone who expected access without responsibility. There is power in saying less and meaning more, in letting your actions be consistent while your words are intentional. When you don't rush to fix what they broke, you give space for truth to surface. Some people only realize the weight of their actions when the noise stops. When your reaction is composed, when you continue living fully, loving yourself loudly, moving forward without bitterness, it disrupts the narrative they told themselves about you. Because here's the truth. People often hurt others to feel powerful, to feel desired, to feel in control. And when your reaction removes their sense of power, they are left with questions. Why isn't she angry? Why isn't she begging? Why isn't she trying to get me back? Why is she okay? That confusion is not about you being cold. It's about you being complete. Your calm communicates boundaries without speeches. It says, I will not carry pain that is not mine to hold. It says, I am allowed to change my mind about people who change how they treat me. It says, I can love deeply and still walk away. That balance is rare. That balance is intimidating. And that balance is unforgettable. There is also courage in letting go of the need to be understood. Not everyone deserves an explanation. Not everyone is capable of receiving one. When you stop explaining yourself to someone who hurt you, you reclaim your energy. You stop reliving the wound for their comfort. You choose healing over history. And healing doesn't always make sense to those who benefited from your pain. The reaction that confuses a man after he hurts you is when you don't let the hurt define you. When you don't let it harden you or humble you into silence. When you transform it into wisdom. When you move with grace, not because it's easy, but because you've decided your future matters more than their apology. Grace is strength that doesn't need an audience. And let's be clear, calm does not mean you didn't feel anything. It means you felt everything and chose yourself anyway. It means you processed the pain privately and emerged with clarity publicly. It means you refused to let someone else's inability to show up determine how you see yourself. That level of emotional maturity is disarming. When you stop reacting and start responding, everything shifts. You stop being a character in someone else's story and become the author of your own. You stop asking why they did it and start asking what you need now. You stop measuring your worth by their attention and start measuring your peace by your alignment. That shift changes how people perceive you, how they remember you, how they feel your absence. Because absence paired with dignity is loud. It echoes, it lingers. It makes people reflect in ways arguments never could. When you walk away without bitterness, without revenge, without theatrics, you leave behind a standard. And standards don't beg, they stand. This reaction is not about confusing anyone on purpose. It's about choosing a life that doesn't revolve around explaining pain to people who caused it. It's about trusting that what's meant to understand you will meet you where you are. It's about knowing that sometimes the strongest message is a life well lived, a heart protected, and a future chosen with intention. You don't need to teach anyone a lesson. Life does that far better than you ever could. Your job is to stay soft without being weak, strong without being harsh, open without being naive. Your job is to rise, not to react. And when you do, when your response is rooted in self-respect, not survival, that is the one reaction they never see coming. It unsettles them because it forces a reckoning they were never prepared for. When you don't collapse into the version of yourself they expected, when you don't orbit around their guilt or confusion, you become unfamiliar territory. And people fear what they cannot predict. They are used to reactions they can manage, emotions they can steer, narratives they can rewrite. Your composed distance takes all of that away. It tells them they no longer get front row access to your inner world. There is something deeply transformative about realizing you don't owe your pain to anyone. You don't owe explanations, emotional labor, or second chances disguised as patience. When you stop offering your wounds as proof of how deeply you care, you reclaim your power. And that reclamation doesn't come with fireworks. It arrives quietly, steadily, like a woman who knows where she's going and doesn't need permission to leave. This kind of reaction changes the dynamic completely. Suddenly, they are the ones replaying conversations, questioning decisions, wondering where they stand. The balance shifts, not because you manipulated the situation, but because you stepped out of it. You chose to no longer participate in some thing that cost you your peace. And peace, once chosen, has a way of rearranging everything around it. What confuses them most is not your silence, but your consistency. You don't disappear dramatically, only to return emotionally available. You don't punish and then soften. You simply remain steady. Your boundaries don't fluctuate based on their mood or attention. You show up for your life with the same grace whether they are watching or not. That stability is unfamiliar to someone who thrives on emotional unpredictability. There is a quiet elegance in knowing when to stop engaging. Not every hurt requires a response. Not every disappointment deserves a discussion. Some moments are simply information. Information about what someone is capable of. Information about what they prioritize. Information about what you deserve. And when you receive that information without resistance, without denial, without self-betrayal, you grow. Growth often looks like detachment to those who benefited from your attachment. It looks like indifference to those who mistook your kindness for availability. But detachment is not indifference. It is discernment. It is the ability to care without carrying, to love without losing yourself, to acknowledge pain without letting it become your identity. Your calm becomes a boundary they cannot cross. It is not cold, it is clear. And clarity is uncomfortable for those who prefer ambiguity, because ambiguity gives them room to escape responsibility. When you are clear, when your actions align with your values, there is nowhere to hide, no mixed signals, no emotional negotiations, just truth, standing still. This reaction also reintroduces you to yourself. You start noticing how much energy you used to spend trying to be understood, chosen, reassured. And in that awareness, you begin redirecting that energy inward, toward your goals, your healing, your growth. You invest in your body, your mind, your dreams. You expand. And expansion makes the past feel smaller. They may not say it out loud, but they feel the shift. They feel the absence of your emotional availability. They feel the space where your patience used to live. They feel the echo of what they lost access to. And that feeling can be deeply confusing, especially when it's paired with the realization that you didn't need closure to move forward. You learn that closure is not something someone gives you. It's something you claim when you decide you've seen enough. When you stop asking questions that keep you tied to answers that won't change anything. When you stop reopening wounds to confirm what you already know. Closure is a choice, and choosing it without permission is liberating. There is strength in being emotionally self-sufficient, in knowing how to sit with discomfort without outsourcing it, in trusting yourself to navigate disappointment without seeking validation from the source of the pain. That strength doesn't make you less loving, it makes you more selective. And selectivity is not arrogance, it's respect for your own capacity. As you continue moving forward, your life begins to speak on your behalf. Your focus sharpens, your standards rise, your tolerance for inconsistency fades. You no longer romanticize potential over patterns. You no longer explain away red flags with hope. You observe, you decide, you act, and that decisiveness is powerful. What once hurt you becomes something you learn from, not something you carry. You stop identifying as the person who was hurt and start identifying as the person who healed. And healing is attractive in a way that chaos never is. It's grounded, it's magnetic, it draws in experiences and people that meet you at your level of self-awareness. Your reaction teaches you that you are capable of more than you thought. That you can survive disappointment without losing your softness. That you can walk away without becoming bitter. That you can hold yourself with compassion while still holding others accountable through distance. That balance reshapes how you show up in every relationship that follows. There is also a deeper lesson in realizing that not every connection is meant to last. Some are meant to teach, some are meant to reveal. Some are meant to end so you can begin again with more wisdom. And when you accept that without resentment, you free yourself from the need to make sense of everything. You allow life to move you forward. The calm you choose becomes a standard you live by. You no longer engage in emotional chaos because you know what it costs you. You no longer chase people who are unsure because you are no longer unsure of yourself. You no longer wait for apologies that may never come because your peace is not dependent on someone else's growth. This reaction, this quiet strength, becomes a language of its own. It speaks through your posture, your decisions, your boundaries. It shows up in how you love yourself, how you protect your time, how you honor your energy. It becomes evident that you are no longer available for relationships that require you to shrink, explain, or endure. And in that space, something shifts within you. You begin to trust yourself more deeply. You listen to your intuition without second-guessing it. You honor your feelings without letting them control you. You understand that walking away is not a failure, but a form of self-respect. And self-respect changes everything. People may come and go, but the way you choose to respond to pain stays with you. It shapes your resilience. It refines your character. It reminds you that your power has always been internal, that you were never meant to be defined by how someone treated you, but by how you chose to rise after it happened. And as you continue forward, grounded, self-aware, unapologetically aligned with your worth, your calm remains your signature. Not loud, not dramatic, just unwavering, in the way it anchors you, even when the world around you feels uncertain. That calm is no longer a reaction, it becomes a lifestyle. You begin to notice how differently you breathe, how your thoughts slow down, how your choices come from intention instead of impulse. You are no longer responding to what happened to you, you are responding to who you are becoming. And that shift changes the way you experience everything. You start to understand that your peace is not fragile, it is cultivated. It is built through self-trust, through listening to the quiet voice inside you that always knew when something felt off. That voice grows louder the moment you stop ignoring it for the sake of someone else's comfort. You stop doubting your instincts. You stop needing permission to feel what you feel. You stand firmly in your truth even when it's uncomfortable. What once felt like loss now feels like clarity. You see how much energy was spent holding space for someone who could not meet you with the same care. You see how often you minimized your needs to avoid conflict. And in that awareness, you make a promise to yourself, never again at the cost of your self-respect. That promise becomes your compass. The confusion they experience often turns into curiosity, then into regret, not because you demanded it, but because you refused to chase. Your absence becomes a presence they cannot ignore. Not because you vanished, but because you evolved. Growth has a way of creating distance without effort. You don't have to announce it. People feel it. You begin to realize that true strength is quiet. It doesn't need witnesses. It doesn't need validatio. It simply exists in the way you show up consistently for yourself. In the way you say no without guilt. In the way you leave situations that drain you, even when you once dreamed they would be different. You honor reality over fantasy, and that honesty frees you. Your emotional independence becomes your foundation. You stop outsourcing your worth. You stop measuring your value through someone else's attention, affection, or effort. You become your own safe place. And when you are safe within yourself, you are no longer afraid of walking alone. Loneliness loses its power when solitude becomes self-connection. This reaction also teaches you patience. Not the kind that waits endlessly for someone to change, but the kind that trusts timing. You learn that what is meant for you will not require you to abandon yourself. It will meet you with consistency, with respect, with emotional safety. Anything that requires you to suffer to stay is not aligned with who you are becoming. As you settle into this version of yourself, your standards are no longer defensive. They are natural. You don't build walls, you build clarity. You don't shut down, you open selectively. You don't fear being misunderstood because you understand yourself. And that self-understanding becomes the most stable relationship you have. You also begin to see how your calm influences others. It sets a tone. It raises the bar. It makes people more mindful of how they show up around you. Not because you demand perfection, but because you embody self-respect. And self-respect is contagious. It invites others to rise or reveals who cannot. There is grace in no longer needing the last word, in letting silence speak where arguments once lived, in allowing people to sit with the consequences of their actions without you cushioning the impact. That grace is not passive, it is intentional. It is the choice to protect your nervous system, your energy, your future. You start to feel proud of how you handled what could have broken you. Proud not because it was easy, but because you stayed aligned. You didn't become bitter. You didn't become closed. You became discerning. And discernment is the refinement of compassion. As time passes, the memory of the hurt softens. Not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer defines you. It becomes a chapter, not the whole story. You carry the lesson, not the weight. And that lightness allows you to move forward with curiosity instead of fear. You learn to trust again, but differently, with eyes open, with boundaries intact, with a deep respect for your emotional landscape. You no longer rush intimacy. You allow people to earn access to your inner world, and that intentionality protects the softness that makes you who you are. Your life begins to reflect your inner stability. Your routines become sacred. Your goals become clearer. Your relationships become more nourishing. You choose environments that support your growth, conversations that inspire you, connections that feel reciprocal. You no longer settle for almost. This reaction, this steady self-possession, becomes the quiet revolution in your life. It changes how you walk into rooms, how you handle disappointment, how you speak to yourself on difficult days. You become someone who does not abandon herself when things get hard. And in becoming that person, you realize something powerful. You were never meant to be understood by everyone. You were meant to be true to yourself. The right people don't get confused by your calm. They feel safe in it.